Okay, so we're working with a new competency. Again, we're back to the next lesson, and we're talking about skilled communication here. And I'm sorry if there's an echo here, but I'm doing this at my son's hockey practice, so I'm in his I'm in the change room now, trying to get a space where there's not so much noise. But I'm gonna try to get this done. So if there's an echo, please excuse that. But we're talking about skilled communication. Now, this is the next competency. Again, I just want to reiterate the idea here, folks, is we're not looking at a lesson in which when you're creating a lesson or adapting a lesson, that you're looking at every single one of the competencies and that every single one is touched on. That's an impossibility, and it would make for some very awkward lessons, and just not something that you could really do. So my advice would be take a particular lesson and take one or two of the competencies and see if you can focus on it. Now, skilled communication is an interesting one because in this day and age, and for the 21st century student is going to have to communicate in an entirely different way, and in many different ways, not in just one way, but in many different ways. So here's the idea. So what are the big ideas that come with this? We're going to just move through. Extended communication. So the idea here is it's not a one-off, and that there is an opportunity in lessons for communication to be ongoing, and there's many different ways that goes on. That does focus about collaboration in a certain amount, but there's communication outside of just your world, the classroom or even the school. So there's an extended idea about that. Multimodal. So its idea is that you're using many different ways to communicate. Obviously, with technology, there's many different tools out there that you can be using, whether you're talking about Twitter or you're talking about Facebook, you're talking about any of the social media, but you're also talking about things like Skype or even if there's just face-to-face contact or an email sort of interaction. So the idea is that you're using multi-modes of communication, and perhaps even if there's communication like body language and nonverbal communication, verbal communication, those sorts of things. And so don't just think this is about technology. It could be about many different things. Requires supporting evidence. And so here, this is kind of old school. This one is the idea that what you're asserting, what you're using, that there's evidence to support that. And then the communication is designed for a particular audience. This is huge. This is a big one in that students now, because of the things like YouTube and blogs and all those sorts of things, and Twitter, social media, they are essentially publishing. And so the idea of teaching students how to create a publication, to create something, to communicate with a specific audience in mind. And so being able to tailor your work to a particular audience is incredibly important, and really important skill that they're going to learn as they move forward. So let's take a look at the spectrum of comfort here. And again, we're going to move down one at a time. You need to have one before you move on to the other. So if you're answering that question. So does this activity require extended or multimodal communication? So really, if you're working on communication, you've got to be looking at doing it in many different ways. And if you can answer no to that, you're at entry level when it comes to communication. And that could be fine. You can say, no, I'm going to use one way of communicating for this. But if you're really looking at, okay, I want this activity, this unit, this assignment, whatever it is, to focus on skilled communication, you got to look at right out of the gate. There's some keywords here, require. So it's not even that they could use multimodal. This is they have to. They have to use it in different ways. And it's extended multimodal communication. So there's different ways to do that. If yes, you move on down to the adoption level. And that's, are students required to provide supporting evidence? So is there in this assignment that you're going to make assertions, or you're going to solve a problem and you're going to make a proposal to someone about how to solve a problem? Does it require them to say, here's why, and here's the evidence that supports my assertions and my ideas? If yes, you move on down. If no, you're at adoption level. Again, that might be cool, but you might want to move down. If you want to move on to that adaptation level, are students required to communicate information and ideas clearly and honestly with sensitivity to others? This is clearly and honestly with sensitivity to others. That comes from the Catholic Graduate Expectations. We use that language. And what this is really what we're talking about here is there a sense that they have a target audience? Are they really looking at communicating that information? One, they have to communicate it outside of their world, outside of just the classroom, essentially. But are they creating it and then understanding that there is a target audience that they have for? So are they sculpting that so that it is honest and direct and sensitive to those people. And that's where that idea that sensitivity to others comes from, is that you have a target audience that's there. If you are, then you're at an infusion level and you can move right on down. And then if you get to that point, your last question is, are students required to communicate their ideas to enhance the quality of life? What does this mean? Again, that's language that comes from the Catholic Graduate Expectations, enhance the quality of life. But what the idea here is, are they required to share this with someone outside of their world? Are they required to do this to solve a problem? And so are they then communicating their ideas, their findings, their solves, their solutions? Are they required to do that? Are they required to communicate this to somebody else to solve a problem? And so those last two points really go hand in hand, because it's, are they looking at a target audience? Yeah, and then are they sharing that? And is it trying to solve a problem? And so there's where that communication comes from. Because you could have the best solution, and we've seen this before and throughout history. You could have the best solution, you could have the best knowledge of a subject, but if you can't communicate that, if you can't get it to the right people and say it in the right way so that they will read it, that they will communicate with it, that they will interact with it, that they may even follow up with you on it, if you can't do that, then it doesn't really matter how good your knowledge is, how good your solution is, because no one's going to actually follow it. So the idea here is this ties in very well with real-world problem solving, in that you're saying, sure, I'm going to have a solution that's tackling a real issue, but if I really want to get it through, I have to be able to communicate that well. So I would, if you're looking to maybe team up a couple of these competencies, real-world problem solving and skilled communication go perfectly well together, because the idea here is that not only are you solving a problem, or you're attempting to solve a problem, and you're working on a real problem in the society, you need to know how to communicate that so that people can use it, so that it can fix something. Again, folks, this is just a little blurb here. There's much more detail to this, but just that idea that you're thinking of maybe adapting a unit to fall more in line with those conventions that are naturally seen as 21st century skills. And again, this is based entirely on years and years of research across the globe. This is one of those. Skilled communications is really important, and you might want to take a look at this and figure out if it can, if these steps can help you help your lesson evolve. And would love to see some examples of that. Again, thanks so much, and signing off from Don Beer Rink 1 dressing room.